So we're off with another week of offers in GTA Online, and we are starting with this, the Armoured Karuma, which, I get so tired of saying this. This is another car that I don't like. And as usual, I have a really weird reason for not liking it. So it's not so much the car itself. The car itself is not actually that bad. It's based on the Mitsubishi Lancer, which was a fairly generic Japanese saloon, but what they decided at Mitsubishi is if they put a shed load of turbos in it and a rather fancy intelligent four-wheel drive system, it might make quite a nice little hot hatch without the hatch. And do you know what? It did. And all that culminated in this, the FQ400. And yes, the FQ does stand for what you think it stands for, and yes, I can confirm it was FQ. So why don't I like it? All the ingredients are there. It's a cool car. These things were cool when you saw them around the streets. I don't want to say back in the day, but you know what I mean, when I was less old. And the car in itself is a fairly faithful representation of that. It looks pretty good. The customization is sort of okay-ish. You can make it look okay-ish, even though it's armoured and it's got the horrible plating all over it. So why don't I like it? Well, it's not that I don't like the car, because I've already said the car itself is pretty good. I don't like the fact that it exists. And the reason for that is you are almost impervious to bullets in this thing. From NPCs, I do need to clarify, this thing won't do you much good in free mode, but in missions against NPCs, you're almost unkillable. They can just about get a few shots in here and there, but on the most part, you're pretty much untouchable. And in a game where a lot of the missions are already, in my view, a little bit too easy, that's not good. It's almost like having a permanent easy mode option. I almost think this thing shouldn't be in your garage, it should be on your weapons wheel, because it's more like a tool or a weapon than an actual car. And to give you an example, the one that really springs to mind is one of the DAX missions. The one out at Stab City where you've got to drive round and you've got to kill everyone and you've got to blow all the tankers up and you've got to destroy all the stuff. I really like that mission. That's a really good, cool mission. It's a good, fun mission. And as a low level, that's quite a challenging mission. I remember really struggling with that. Back when my account was a bit younger and I was a lower level, I didn't have as much health, I didn't have all the good weapons, I wasn't as good at the combat side of things. And I remember really struggling with that. And I remember being really, really chuffed when I actually got through it. Now, if I'd have had one of these, which I didn't at the time, I could have just rocked up and just used my pistol to shoot through the window and just pootle round, shoot people, job's good and mission done, on to the next one. And I'm sorry, but that's just boring. A lot of people by now have already done all of the missions in this game so many times. So I'm not sure. I can understand why you'd want to look to do them quicker to make more money. But I don't know about making them easier, because most of them are already easy enough. And to prove this point, I actually took it on the Clucking Bell heist. So I did the weapons mission, so the weapons and gear. I did the first half of this in the Armoured Karuma, like this, pootling around. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. Everyone's dead. Mission done, on to the next one. So then the next one, I actually picked the one that was offshore, so I had to go through and do it properly, and it was so much more fun, and it wasn't really that much harder. Now, kind of changed my mind a little bit, because on the way back, I thought I'd prove the point about how indestructible this thing was, and I just went around teasing all the NPCs that were chasing me. Now at this point, that was kind of fun. So I've kind of conflicted myself now, because I actually had fun being a bit of a dick towards the NPCs. Now on balance, that would probably get boring really quite quickly. So I'm going to go back to my original opinion that this thing just makes missions far too easy, and that is my big problem with it. It's not the car. The car is fine. It's the fact that the car exists and that you use this car to make missions easier. So, while we're here, let's have a look at the top speed. And for anyone that's new to the channel, this is a measured mile on the track that I drive as fast as I possibly can, then just do a little bit of simple maths, and that gives you an achievable top speed through traffic. Not a theoretical top speed, not a top speed if you're going downhill with the wind behind you. This is a top speed you can actually hit and maintain if you're trying to get away from things. And this is what the Armoured Karuma managed to do. And before I move on, that's another part of this that bugs me. This is so generic, it doesn't even have an interesting name. So, as I said earlier, it's based on the Mitsubishi Lancer, so it's a Japanese car. And if you look at what Karuma means in Japanese, Karuma means car. So they couldn't even be bothered to name it, they just thought, what is it? It's a car. Let's just call it a car, but in Japanese. That's how generic this thing is. Now, one thing I did notice is this is actually really good for getting away from things. So I thought, why not take it on and across the map as well? Because I honestly thought, when I had that genius idea, that it would absolutely shred on the across the map. Because this one, I've put off-road tyres on this, and it does do okay off-road, but it suffers from what quite a lot of cars in this game suffer from off-road, in that it's just too light and it just gets thrown around everywhere, and that really affected the time on the off the road, and it ended up putting in what I can only say is a fairly middle of the road time. It's certainly not impressive at all. I mean, it's okay, it's faster than some of the dedicated off-roaders, and it wasn't a particularly clean session, but half of that was to do with the fact that it's so light and it's just so easy to get thrown off course in this thing. So that's the lap, and that's the across the map. So as we finish up, what do I really think of this thing? Well, it's on offer with this week's GTA Online weekly update, and it's about 400,000. Which, let's be honest, that's not a lot for GTA Online, and it is a useful car. So what I would say is, if you are really early in the game, and you're a low level, and you don't have all the best weapons, and you're still not quite used to the combat, and if you're struggling with some of the missions, even if you're really stuck on one of the missions, there's a good chance that this car will be able to get you through that mission. Basically because it makes you invincible. But if you're not early in the game, I would say just don't buy it. At this stage in GTA Online's life, we need to be looking for ways to make the missions more interesting. We need to be looking for ways to make them more varied. I mean, yes, let's look at ways of making them faster if we're wanting to earn more to buy more stuff. I'm completely down with that. But just making them easier? I don't think that's really a priority at the moment. These missions are well easy enough. With the possible exception, some of the Doomsday heist missions are pretty challenging. That's why I really like that heist. So that's a very long way of getting round to why I'm not a fan of this car. And it's just that it makes things too easy. I think it removes some of the enjoyment from the game. I think it removes some of the need to get better. Because if you go back to that Dax mission, to get through that you need to learn how to use cover, you need to learn which weapons to use to explode things and how to get people from the right distance and all that good stuff. Whereas if you just roll around in this, you don't need to learn any of that, and you never get any better. So this is the time it managed to do, which is a fairly middle of the road, you know, a 943 for a car that isn't a supercar. It's not awful. And is it worth it? Well, as I say, if you're new to the game, if you're a low level, if you're struggling with missions, this really is a must buy. It's on everyone's must buy list of the, if you go through YouTube and look for people's lists of 10 things that every player must have, this will be on every one of those. I would be tempted to see if you could do without it, just because I think it will remove that challenge, and I think in the long term you'll end up better at the game if you don't rely on this. So as ever, a really nice confusing bit of consumer advice for you there. I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next one.